Have you ever stayed in an Airbnb and just felt off? Like something wasn't quite right? I've had my fair share of travel adventures, but today I want to share 3 stays that went beyond just a lumpy bed or a leaky faucet. These were experiences that left me genuinely unsettled, questioning what was real and what was just my imagination. So, buckle up, because we're about to check in to some of the strangest places I've ever slept. My first story takes us to a charming little cottage in the English countryside. The photos were perfect: ivy-covered walls, a thatched roof, and a cozy fireplace. When I arrived, it was just as picturesque. The host, an elderly woman named Eleanor, gave me a quick tour. She was sweet, but there was a strange sadness in her eyes. The first night was peaceful. The second night, however, was different. Around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by what sounded like a music box playing a lullaby. It was faint, but unmistakable. I got up, checked every room, looked out the windows, nothing. I figured I was just dreaming and went back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same melody. This time, I was wide awake and a little spooked. I grabbed my phone to record it, but as soon as I hit the record button, the music stopped. Just complete silence. Now, I was on edge. I spent the rest of the night with the lights on, jumping at every creak of the old house. The next morning, as I was packing to leave, I noticed a small, locked wooden box on the mantelpiece. I hadn't seen it before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I jiggled the tiny lock. It popped open. Inside, there was a single tarnished silver music box. I didn't dare open it. I just closed the wooden box, left the key on the table, and got out of there as fast as I could. I never found out the story behind it, and honestly, I don't think I want to. All right, story number 2. This one happened in a modern minimalist apartment in a bustling city in Japan. It was one of those super efficient, high-tech places with smart lighting and automated everything. The host was a young guy who managed a bunch of properties, and I never met him in person. It was all done through codes and apps. The first couple of days were great, but then I started noticing little things. I'd leave a book on the coffee table, and when I came back, it would be on the nightstand. I'd close the blinds before going out, and they'd be open when I returned. At first, I blamed my own forgetfulness. Jet lag, you know? But the weirdest part was the closet. It was a large sliding door closet in the bedroom. One night, I was watching a movie when I heard a soft thud from inside it. I paused the movie, listened, nothing. I convinced myself it was the building settling. But then, I started feeling like I was being watched, especially when I was in the bedroom. The feeling was so intense that I started sleeping on the couch in the living room. On my last day, I was packing my suitcase on the floor. My passport slipped out of my bag and slid right under the closet door. With a deep sigh, I pulled the door open to retrieve it, and that's when I saw it. Tucked away in the far back corner, behind some spare bedding, was a small, worn teddy bear, and next to it, a freshly peeled orange. My blood ran cold. I hadn't brought any oranges. I grabbed my passport, my suitcase, and left without even locking the door. Someone else had been in that apartment with me, or at least had been coming and going. The thought still gives me chills. Okay, for the final story, we're heading to a remote cabin in the mountains of Colorado. This was supposed to be a digital detox trip, no Wi-Fi. No cell service, just me and the wilderness. The cabin was rustic and isolated, exactly what I was looking for. The owner left the key under a rock and a note with basic instructions. The first day was pure bliss. I went for a hike, read by the fire, and enjoyed the absolute silence. But that night, the silence was broken. I heard scratching. Not the sound of a mouse or a squirrel, but a rhythmic, deliberate scratching on the outside wall of the cabin, right behind the headboard of my bed. I froze, listening. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. It went on for what felt like an hour. I was terrified. The nearest neighbor was miles away. There was no one to call. I barricaded the door with a chair and didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I went outside to investigate. I expected to see claw marks from a bear or some other animal, but there was nothing. Not a single mark on the wooden walls. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a branch rubbing against the house in the wind. But the air was completely still. The second night, it was worse. The scratching started again, but this time it was accompanied by a low, humming sound. It sounded almost human. I was too scared to even look out the window. I spent the entire night huddled in the corner of the room, listening to the scratching and humming until the sun came up. As soon as it was light, I packed my things. As I was loading my car, I did one last walk around the cabin. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Carved into the base of a huge pine tree about 50 feet from the cabin were dozens and dozens of tally marks. Groups of 5 etched deep into the bark, looking like someone had been counting something for a very, very long time. I didn't stay to count them myself. I got in my car and drove until I had a cell signal. I never looked back. So, there you have it. 3 Airbnb stays that were more unnerving than relaxing. Have you ever had a creepy or unexplainable experience while traveling? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more adventures. Stay safe out there. I've traveled a lot, and I almost always stay in Airbnbs. It's a great way to see a city from a local's perspective. Most of my stays have been amazing, full of charm and character. But a couple of them have been downright unsettling. Experiences that made me pack my bags in the middle of the night and question what I really saw or heard. Today, I'm going to tell you about 2 of those stays, the ones that still give me chills when I think about them. My first story takes place in a historic brownstone in Savannah, Georgia. Now, if you know anything about Savannah, you know it's considered one of America's most haunted cities. I wasn't looking for a spooky experience, just wanted a beautiful place to stay. The listing photos were gorgeous. It was a basement apartment with exposed brick walls, vintage furniture, and a really cozy vibe. The reviews were all glowing. So, I booked it for a long weekend. When I arrived, it was even better than the pictures. The host left a nice handwritten note and a bottle of wine. Everything was perfect. The first night, I slept like a log. Nothing unusual. The second day, I spent hours walking around the historic squares, soaking in the city's atmosphere. I made some tea, put on some music, and started reading. That's when the first weird thing happened. I heard footsteps, clear as day, from the floor above me. Now, this was a basement unit, so the main part of the house was upstairs. I assumed it was the host or their family. The footsteps were heavy, like someone was pacing back and forth from one end of the room to the other. It went on for about 10 minutes, then stopped. A little odd, but I shrugged it off. Old houses make noises, right? I went to bed around 11. At about 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. It sounded like a heavy book had been dropped on the floor right next to my bed. My heart was pounding. I turned on the lamp, but there was nothing there. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I tried to tell myself I was dreaming, but I was wide awake. The air in the room felt suddenly cold and heavy. I couldn't get back to sleep after that. I just lay there, listening, and that's when I heard the whispering. It wasn't coming from upstairs this time. It was faint, but it sounded like it was coming from inside the room. I couldn't make out any words. It was just a soft, sibilant murmur. I pulled the covers up to my chin, my eyes scanning the shadows in the room. I felt like I was being watched. The whispering continued on and off for what felt like an eternity, until the first light of dawn started to peek through the small basement window. As soon as the sun was up, the whispering stopped. The cold feeling in the room disappeared. I was exhausted, but I knew I couldn't stay another night. I quickly packed my things. As I was about to leave, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Tucked away on a bookshelf was a small, leather-bound guest book. I flipped it open out of curiosity. Most of the entries were what you'd expect. Lovely stay, beautiful apartment. But then I found an entry from a few months prior. It read, "Charming place," but the late-night conversations kept us awake. Seemed like the host was having a party. I checked out, found a last-minute hotel, and tried to forget about it. But that feeling of being watched, the sound of the whispers, it stayed with me. Later, I did some research on the neighborhood. It turned out the house was built on what used to be a burial ground. I'm not saying it was ghosts, but I can't explain what I experienced. My second story is a bit different. It wasn't about whispers or cold spots. It was much more psychological. This happened in a remote cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. I was there for a solo writing retreat. The idea was to disconnect, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just me and my laptop. The cabin was exactly what I was looking for. It was tiny, rustic, and surrounded by miles of dense forest. The nearest neighbor was a good 20-minute drive away. The first few days were incredible. The silence was absolute. I was getting so much writing done. The cabin itself had a strange layout. It was basically one big room, but the owner had built a loft for the bed, which you had to climb a steep ladder to get to. The main living area had these huge windows that looked out into the woods. It was beautiful during the day, but at night, it felt like looking into a black mirror. On the fourth night, I was working late. It was around midnight. I was sitting at the small wooden table, facing the large windows. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked up, expecting to see a deer or a raccoon, but I saw nothing, just the dark trees swaying in the wind. I told myself it was my tired eyes playing tricks on me and went back to my work. About an hour later, it happened again. This time, it was more distinct. It looked like a figure, tall and thin, moving quickly between the trees at the edge of the clearing. My blood ran cold. Remember, there's no cell service. I was completely alone out there. I quickly stood up and turned on the outdoor floodlight. The light illuminated the yard and the first few rows of trees. There was nothing there, not a single thing. I tried to rationalize it, a shadow, an animal. My own overactive imagination fueled by isolation and horror movies. I locked the door, not that it would do much good. It was a flimsy wooden door. Climbed the ladder to the loft. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of leaves outside made me jump. I spent the next hour just staring out the small loft window, peering into the darkness. And that's when I saw it again, the figure. It was standing at the far edge of the woods, partially hidden by a large pine tree. It was completely still. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a dark silhouette against the slightly less dark forest. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching the cabin. I ducked down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I don't know how long I stayed like that, crouched on the floor of the loft. 10 minutes, an hour, and I finally got the courage to peek again. It was gone. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Soon as the sun came up, I packed my bag. I didn't even make coffee. I just threw everything in my car and got out of there as fast as I could. I drove for an hour until I finally got a cell signal and called the Airbnb owner. I didn't tell him I saw a figure. I didn't want to sound crazy. I just said I had a family emergency and had to leave early. He was very understanding. To this day, I have no idea what I saw. Was it a person? A hiker who was lost? Or was it just my mind, isolated in the woods, creating a threat that wasn't there? The ambiguity is what's most unsettling. With the Savannah brownstone, I can tell myself it was just an old, creaky house. But the figure in the woods, that felt real. It felt intentional. These experiences haven't stopped me from using Airbnb, but they've definitely made me more cautious. I read reviews more carefully now, and I always always trust my gut. If a place feels wrong, it probably is. Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that have no clear explanation, the ones that leave you questioning your own sanity. Have you ever had a strange or unsettling experience while traveling? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. It's oddly comforting to know I'm not the only one who has experienced things that QE unexplain. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Have you ever stayed somewhere that just felt off? Like the pictures online looked perfect, but the moment you stepped inside, a weird chill ran down your spine. I've had my fair share of travel adventures, but a couple of my Airbnb stays were so unsettling they still make me question what was really going on. I'm going to share two of them with you today. The first one was a quaint little cottage in the English countryside. It was advertised as a historic weaver's home, full of charm and character. And it was, but the character was a bit more active than I expected. The first night, I was woken up by what sounded like a loom, a rhythmic thud and clack coming from the attic. I assumed it was just the old house settling, or maybe the heating system kicking in. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Always around 3 a.m. on the third night, I got brave and decided to investigate. The attic was locked with an old, rusty padlock. I mentioned the noise to the owner when I checked out. She just smiled faintly and said, "Oh, that's just Thomas. He was a weaver who lived here centuries ago. He just likes to keep busy." I laughed it off as a joke, but her eyes weren't laughing. The second story is even stranger. I booked a modern minimalist apartment in a bustling city in Japan. It was sleek, clean, and totally soulless. The listing had a strange rule. Do not move the small stone statue on the bookshelf. It was a little frog, no bigger than my thumb. I figured it was a sentimental item, so of course, I respected the rule. But my curiosity got the better of me. On my last day, just before I left, I picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy. Underneath it was a tiny, folded piece of paper. My Japanese is very basic, but I could make out a few characters. What I think it said was, "Now it will follow you." I quickly put the statue back, my heart pounding. Was it a prank for nosy guests like me? I have no idea. But for weeks after I got home, I'd swear I saw a tiny shadow darting just at the edge of my vision. Now, I'm a pretty rational person. There are probably logical explanations for both of these things. The cottage noise could have been a faulty water pipe, and the note in the Japanese apartment could have been a simple prank. But that feeling, it's that unsettling sense that you've stumbled into someone else's story. A story that isn't quite finished is something that has stayed with me. It adds a certain thrill to traveling, I guess. You never know what secrets a place is holding. It makes you wonder what's real and what's just your imagination running wild in an unfamiliar place. Maybe it's the house that's haunted, or maybe it's just your own mind playing tricks on you when you read alone in the dark. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a creepy travel experience. I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.